All right, so what we've been doing the past couple of weeks is factoring quadratics using our X method. But the problem is that that doesn't always work. So what is our option then if it doesn't work? And the answer is this one equation that if you remember anything from 10th grade math, it'll probably be this equation. But it is called the quadratic equation. And I'm just going to go ahead and start writing it down. And I'm going to start by color coding some things. So I'm going to start with negative b plus or minus. And this will come back in a few minutes. And I'm going to use my ruler because this is kind of a big equation. It'll be a big radical, the square root of b squared minus 4 times my a value and my c value. 4ac, and that entire thing is going to be divided by 2 times a. And we have to remember that our equation, our quadratic, is in standard form for this equation. Our standard form is ax squared plus or minus bx plus c. So what's happening is you are getting a quadratic in standard form, and you are taking that and plugging it into this equation. So I think the best way to go and attack this is just to do an example. So number 1, you're given the equation x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 0. And yeah, you could solve this using your X method, but the reason I want to show you an easier problem using the quadratic equation is that you know what to do when it gets a little tougher. So a is 1, our first coefficient, b is 5, and c is 6. And I'm going to go ahead and plug all these into my equation. So first up, we have negative b, so negative 5, plus or minus the square root, make my lines now, of b squared, so 5 squared, minus 4 times my a value times my c value divided by 2 times a. So 4 times 1 times 6, all divided by 2 times 1. And I'm writing all of these for now. Of course, if you see something as times 1, you don't have to include it, but just to show you how we're getting all of our numbers, I wanted to show you the full version. And then we start solving this. These, I see a lot of errors when people try to go a little too fast. Slow it down with these equations and solve it piece by piece. So first we have this negative 5. I'm just going to leave it out front. Plus or minus, that'll come back in at the end. The square root, see if I can make it kind of a straight line, kind of. 5 squared is 25. Then we have negative 4 times 1 times 6. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. Times 6 gives me negative 4 times 6 is negative 24. All divided by 2 times 1, or 2. You know what? I'm sorry, but this is bugging me. Got to fix it a little bit. Okay. Now we're just going to keep going. We have -5 plus or minus 25 minus 4 is the square root of 25 minus 4, or 1, divided by 2. So what this becomes, the square root of 1 is 1. It's not always going to be easy. Sometimes you might have a huge number like 893, and you have to simplify that radical. But for right now, it's perfect. It worked out. So we have -5 plus or minus 1 over 2. At this point, we need to split it up a little tiny bit. And what I mean by that is I'm going to draw 2 arrows. They're optional. And I'm going to write -5 plus 1 divided by 2, and -5 minus 1 divided by 2. Because I'm going to have 2 answers a lot of the time. Just like with the linear equation, you've got 1 answer. With a quadratic, you have 2, usually, at least for right now. So we are going to do -5 plus 1 gives me -4 divided by 2. You can write that if you'd like. Equals -2. That's my first answer. -5 minus 1 becomes -6 divided by 2 is -3. Just make sure if you find your answers, your factors there, please try to write them next to each other so that when I'm grading, I can make sure that you got both of them, and then a nice box around them. I'm going to zoom out. That's our first example. What we're finding are our factors. Next example we're going to do is going to be a little bit trickier. So this is one where we don't get a perfect 1 underneath our radical. So I'm going to flip my page over. And I'm going to even write my equation just at the very top just so I can remember it. -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by, that's the worst division I've ever, ooh, that's so bad, divided by 2a. And my example 2 is going to be -8x squared minus 4x plus 5. Color coding it again. A is -8. B is -4. And C is 5. And we're just going to plug it in. So what we've got here is negative B, so -4 plus or minus, and I've got to use my ruler because I'm getting some bad lines. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. Let's even color code that. B squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. So 4 times a is -8. -8 goes down here as well. 4ac. We're going to start by simplifying our discriminant. So our discriminant, we've got, you know what, I am going to fix this right here. I don't like that double negative. I'm just going to make that automatically a +4. Plus or minus the square root of -4 squared gives me +16. And I'm just going to do -4 times -8 times +5. Negative times a negative is giving me a positive. And then you would type this in your calculator. You could do it in your head. But what you're going to end up getting, 4 times 8 times 5, is 160. all divided by negative 16. Oh, now I keep doing this. I don't know why this little tail right here bugs me so much, but I can't handle it. No. I guess I'm going to have to handle it. My little thing's not working. I guess that's okay. That's the worst thing that's happened to me today. It's not that big of a deal. So although I'm annoyed by this, we're going to leave it. And I'm just going to keep simplifying now. So I have 4 plus or minus the square root of 176, 16 plus 60, divided by negative 16. I could simplify a little, but I'm going to wait. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to simplify my radical, because 176 is just an ugly radical. We don't like it. It can be broken down. So I'm going to draw this arrow, and I'm going to say simplify radical. So we have a square root of 176. I have no idea what the biggest perfect square that goes into that is going to be. So I would pull out my calculator and start trying a bunch of different roots. Maybe I would try 176 divided by, let's see, 64. Nope, kind of close, but no. 176 divided by, let's do 36. 176 divided by, let's just try 25 and see. Nope. 176 divided by, let's try 16. Oh, and it works. And then 11 is going to be a prime number, so I know that this is the greatest perfect square. So we have 176 under a radical breaks up into the square root of 16 times the square root of 11. Square root of 16 is 4. Square root of 11 cannot be broken down. So my simplified radical is 4 root 11. So now what I'm going to do is bring it back and rewrite this with my simplified radical. So we have my 4 plus or minus my new radical, 4 square root of 11 divided by negative 16. And now what I can do is split this up. Into 4 plus 4 square root of 11 divided by negative 16, and 4 minus 4 root 11 divided by negative 16. And for this one, I'm going to focus just on my 1/2 at a time. You know what I'm realizing is that this can be simplified. 4 over 16 is the same thing as 1 over 4. So what I can do is say, okay, well, this is going to be 4 plus 4. Let's do 4 over negative 16 and 4 over negative 16. We're going to get negative 1 minus square root of 11 over 4. The reason that we get that is because we've got a negative 16 on the bottom. So we could actually kind of break this up into 4 over negative 16. We'd get negative 1 over 4. 4 over negative 16 would be negative 1 over 4. But because it's being multiplied, we don't have to write that other negative 1. So there is that invisible 1 that's in front of everything being multiplied by it. We just don't have to write it. So this is actually going to be my first answer. And you're not finding that by doing your X method. So going on to my next problem, same thing. I can just start simplifying. 4 over negative 16 minus 4 over negative 16, that's a double negative. So we're going to get, and actually, let me just really quick show you what I was doing. I was breaking up into 4 over negative 16 and negative 4 over root 11 over negative 16, and simplifying both and putting them back together. So we have 4 over negative 16 is negative 1. Negative over a negative is a positive. So plus the square root of 1 times the square root of 11 over 4. That's my second answer. So this is where the equation is super important, because if you were just solving using the x method, you would have to figure out what multiplies by each other to get a certain number, which would be 8 times 5, and what's going to add to get negative 4. These would be your factors. You're not figuring that out in your head. So if you find something that doesn't work with the x method, you've got to use your equation. This is the most complicated problem that you're going to see for a while. They get more complicated, but right now it's just all about figuring out this formula. So my answer is the final step, negative 1 minus root 11 over 4, and negative 1 plus, that's a bad plus sign, root 11 over 4. Those are my answers. And the good news is that this equation is going to work with everything you do. Just make sure that your work is super, super clear when you're submitting it, so that whoever's grading it is able to really help guide you through your problem and make sure that you know exactly what you're doing and they can tell exactly where you went wrong if you make a mistake. I'm going to zoom out, and then now you're good to try some on your own.